Welcome in, everybody, to a Tuesday edition of Birds 365, an April 1st, April Fool's Day edition of Birds 365. No getting fooled out there. We will not fool you here. We got a 2-hour show on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Tuesday edition of the show?
Yeah, April Fools, not a big fan. Be careful of the Goofy Schefter made-up tweets that everybody seems to enjoy. But, yeah, Nick Sirianni talking right now at the NFL coaches meeting, league meeting, actually, but coaches breakfast, NFC this morning. So we'll get you more information about that later in the show, hopefully. Wish I was there, but I'm not. But there's a big crowd around Nick Sirianni. It's hilarious because of Philadelphia versus the other coaches. But part of the process, he did write off, address his contract status, which still no extension, but he doesn't want to talk about it. Said it'll get done. So it'll work itself out. Just
him and Howie are up, so we'll see if those guys get their contract worked out. Speaking of Howie, as John just mentioned, we have Nick talking, so we'll talk to you about that once we get a little bit more intel from that. Howie spoke to Kay Adams yesterday. I thought that was a pretty good interview. Howie's still milking the beer can to the head.
Yeah.
Spent 2 minutes.
Zapruder film. Kay stole my Zapruder film. I was the first to put that out, but she can have it. She's
Yeah, Kay gets it. Sorry, Johnny Mac. Sorry, Johnny Mac. Kay's going to win that one.
Yes, she is. And that's fine. But yeah, when the Zapruder film came out, Howie got bonked right on the head. I don't think Kay watched it, though, because, people are saying Howie dropped it. Now he just got blindsided like The Walking Dead or something. Yeah, big beer can.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting his comments on the Saquon Barkley contract extension, and that's one thing I agree with as an organization. They didn't really get much from it. They didn't have to do it, but Howie's philosophy of when a guy does something like that for you, you take care of him, and I thought that was a good philosophy because I think it shows more of the league, the way you do business, and it makes it a place to play where people want to come and they want to be great here. So I thought that was pretty good. That answer. I mean, he didn't say too much of substance, but I thought that was a good response on, why pay Saquon now.
Yeah. I mean, I thought, I think it's pretty obvious why they paid Saquon, but I think the bigger aspect from Howie was explaining the CJ Gardner-Johnson trade, because I think that's the most controversial move, I guess, of the offseason. That's the one that sort of came out of left field, I would say. More than anything else. So that to me was the most interesting part. I mean, Saquon had the best running season in the history of the NFL. So he talked about it as a whole ranging philosophy, not only Saquon, but Zach Bond and Lane Johnson, framing the entire offseason as one. You want to take care, and I've talked about that demarcation line. You want to take care of those guys while also keeping your eye on what's upcoming with Jalen Carter and Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, et cetera, even Nolan Smith, Reed Blankenship potentially. Cam Jurgens is going to get a big extension. So all that and sort of explaining the entire piece of the pie. That would be the most frustrating thing for me,
right,
as a general manager, because one of the things he said was the offseason is incomplete, right now. Which to me is like, yeah, it's April 1st, duh. But you have to explain that. Now, when you have to explain it to the fan base, that to me is frustrating enough. But when you have to explain it to your owner and he doesn't, that's an advantage I always talk about. Sometimes you got to explain it.
Yeah, right.
The most famous part of me about the whole Saquon thing with Hard Knocks and Joe Shane and John Mara, Joe Shane having to explain himself to Mara. It's like, come on, dude. What are you, 10? My kid understands it. But that's one advantage of what the Eagles have that a lot of teams, as silly as it sounds, do not have. They have to sit down and explain this kind of stuff and say, well, yeah, we're not complete. It's April 1st. There's not even the draft. We're going to talk about the draft. The draft hasn't even happened. Forget about potential trades and going back to CJ, Nick just talked about it this morning before he jumped on talking about CJ. They got him at the initial cut down to 53 the first time. Yeah, it's like people forget this. If you go back to the last time, you think about how late James Bradbury was signed. That was the same year as CJ Gardner-Johnson. And that was also the draft day trade for AJ Brown. So, if you go back to April 1st that year, people are saying, well, this is underwhelming.
Right.
It's incomplete. And he explained that. I think he explained it well. If people listen, I think he's been far more honest this offseason than.
Yeah, I feel that too. I feel as though Howie's been honest.
And I think a lot of that has to do with, having you just won a Super Bowl. So
right.
You're a little bit more confident in just saying the truth instead of always spinning things. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I think that's natural, right? I mean, you win it all. You feel like for a second your shit doesn't stink and you might be able to get away with some more things, or just that you're confident in what you've done and what you've done for the last 8 years for this team. And I think you should be. So good stuff there from Howie. Nick just spoke on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, said Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Cooper DeJean as players who could bring energy that would help with the loss of Gardner-Johnson. So the one thing about the Gardner-Johnson move, John, is they haven't tried to act like they didn't know he was a good player, which I think is a good thing. I mean, to your credit about them being more honest, like how we spoke about him as a good player. Nick is clearly speaking about him there as a loss of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So there is a little bit of honesty in the air around the Eagles organization at this time of the year.
Yeah, I almost don't know what to do with it other than I appreciate it. And some of the things, and he explained the whole situation with CJ, really extensive kind of conversation, which basically is everything you heard on the show.
Right.
So I'm glad that that sort of got validated in what they're trying to do, and the sort of really deep in depth kind of discussion on what exactly they're doing. And the 2024, he mentioned specifically the 2022 to 2024 group of players who aren't under long-term contracts. So the guys under the rookie deals, that's every dollar you spend is $1 less that you could spend on some of the younger players, is what he said. And that's sort of what's going on, because they know what's coming down the road with some of these players. And I know it's hard in the moment, but they've been very disciplined. And then Dallas Goedert as well said no update, but you surely get the feeling that it's getting far more likely than not that Dallas Goedert's not going to be here next season. And that's just my speculation, that part of it. But, they would have worked something out.
Yeah, it didn't sound like. Did you hear how we talk about Goddard? It didn't sound like. Yeah, it didn't sound too good.
Yeah. So, you can read between the lines there, but yeah, everything we've talked about and the cash strap nature of it, what's upcoming with the contracts, is the reason this offseason looks like what it looks like at this point. But it isn't over. Obviously the draft is most notable, but you bring up the AJ Brown trade in the draft, you bring up CJ Gardner-Johnson, as Nick did this morning, how late that was the first time they got him. James Bradbury, I've talked about the post compensatory pick signings, which can start the Monday after the draft. Maybe Justin Simmons shows up.
Right. That's like a whole nother phase of free agency there, Johnny Mac, is post draft because of all these comp picks.
Well, a little bit. I mean, there's
it's obviously not as big.
There's not a ton of guys in that position, but there's a few, and it'll happen. You'll see it throughout the league. There's also not a ton of teams every year that are playing the comp pick game substantially, but there's a few each year. So it's not huge, but it's meaningful for the teams that are playing that game. And the Eagles are. Some years they're not. Last year they weren't. This year they are. So that factors into it as well. And that'll change some things and change some philosophy. Also, if people were listening, talking about CJ, also brought up Sydney, and I'm glad he did that. Not by name, but he said there's one position one of these young players hasn't had an opportunity yet. That's safety. He's talking about Sidney Brown.
Are you in on Sidney Brown, or you feel good about that based on what you've seen from that player? If you're Howie, you think he's making the right move at that position with Sidney Brown?
Well, it depends how you frame it. Is he a much better option than Tristan McCullum or Lewis Seen? Yes. Is he a much better option than CJ Gardner-Johnson? No. I mean, but the Eagles have been honest about that. That's like saying he's no different than Moro Ojomo or Kelee Ringo.
Right.
From their perspective. And in fact, he might be ahead of some, behind some others. No guarantee of anything. And they're going to bring in somebody to compete at some point, because they don't want to hand, and they've done it and they've been consistent. They don't want to hand anything to anybody. So if it's Tyler Steen, you got Kenyon Green, and you have even Matt Pryor. And if it's Kelee Ringo, you have Adoree Jackson. And right now you don't have that for Sidney Brown, and they have to bring that in. They're not just going to hand him the job, but whoever gets the job, Sidney Brown, Justin Simmons at 32, they're not going to be CJ next year. It's just like Moro Ojomo is not going to be Milton Williams. You can cross your fingers all you want. Ain't
Right.
going to happen. So, but you can get better at other positions and sort of make up for it. But when you lose players of significance, and CJ has proven to be a player of significance in 2 different one-year stints, 6 interceptions, led the NFL 6 interceptions, playmaker, yada, yada, yada. You don't just replace that, as you saw by the year in between. CJ's probably the best example, because they had him, they let him go, and they got him back.
Right.
Playmaker, playmaker, to be continued.
Playmaker, playmaker, That's my prediction. I'm sorry, Eagles fans. That is my prediction.
Well, it's probably a good bet. Yeah. I'll say that.
All right. Well, there you go. For I'm not a betting man, but today I'm a betting man. I like Sidney Brown. I think he has potential as a player, John. I think if he needs to be more disciplined on the field, but I like his energy. I like his athleticism, his high motor. But I don't know. I mean, you haven't seen much from that player. I don't know if he's ready for a full-time safety role, but we'll see what they end up doing at the safety position. But I'm more sold on Moro Ojomo than I am on Sidney Brown, for sure. Based on Moro played a lot more last year, obviously, but
yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of. Yeah, there's more unknown because Sidney hasn't played, but I think if you go back to the rookie season, I think you'd say the exact opposite. And he tore his ACL in week 18.
Yeah, that's true. That definitely messed him up, because that was a late injury that year, and he actually was coming alive at the end of that season. I don't know how many games he played in his rookie year, John.
Remember the 99-yard touchdown interception?
Yeah.
I mean, I think people would have been pretty hyped if that was week 18 last year.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair point. That's fair point. But what did he have?
It happened in week 17. Yeah, it happened in week 7. The interception got hurt in week 18, but you get my point. If it happened late, people would be pretty hyped about Sidney. So, yeah, I think it's gotten more to the point that people have forgotten him. And again, I always talk about this. Just because he's out there doesn't mean he's healthy. And he wasn't healthy last year. So a lot of people, fall into that trap. Well, they were playing Tristan McCullum ahead of him. Yeah, they were, because he wasn't ready to play on defense. He could run straight, not a big cut. So they thought he could help on special teams. He wanted to be out there. Came back, missed a couple games, came back. Hopefully he's healthy. Like, he's a much higher bigger prospect than Tristan McCullum. And even Lewis Cine. Now, people get excited about Lewis Cine because of his draft status, and he was a first round pick, even though he's number 32 overall. So
Right.
he's, this far away from being a second round pick, but either way, it's still a high pick. And he's done nothing. I mean, nothing. And people say Kenyon Green, at least he played. Lewis Cine couldn't even get on the field.
Yeah, first round pick out of Georgia, and you can't get on the field. That's
so. I wouldn't get too hyped up about that. It's a worthwhile lottery ticket, just as we talked about with a lot of these 1 year prove it guys. But yeah, I wouldn't be penciling. Howie ain't mentioning Lewis Cine. If it works, it works. And maybe being around his buddies and all that kind of stuff helps him. But boy, he broke his leg in his rookie season. But I think people forget that was like week 5, week 6. He was nowhere near the field. He was not playing well before that. And their GM almost got fired early in his career because that was his first draft, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and it was a freaking disaster. Look back at that draft.
I remember you ripping him on his first draft.
Oh my God! Well, they traded down. They had a relatively high pick, and they traded down. But not only did they trade down, they handed Jameson Williams in their division to the Detroit Lions. They had that pick.
Right.
And even though, and I thought at the time, Jameson Williams was going to be a really good player. Hasn't lived up to that status, but he has, he got hurt, but he has proven to be a big time playmaker, make a big, and he killed them last season. So right away, this guy's scoring touchdowns against you, and you hand that player to a division rival, and he's only going to get better as he gets healthy. I'm talking about Williams. And meanwhile, he goes all the way down. I forget, he was like the 12th pick in the draft, Jameson Williams. So they go all the way down to 32 to get essentially what they wanted to do was double up with Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth from Clemson, if you remember Andrew Booth, and it was like 42. So on paper, it looks pretty good. You can see he's an analytics guy, blah, blah. You swung and missed on both players to a ludicrous degree.
Yeah. He's bounced back, though. He's bounced back. He's been better.
He has been better, but it's mainly free agency. The drafts have not been good.
Yeah. Well, look, the one thing I always try and do, but I know it doesn't work like this because most owners aren't the same. But look at Howie. I mean, I think these guys that need to have a little bit more time, man. GM jobs. Like there isn't a blueprint that exists out there. If you get a job as another, thing in the world, there's most of the time there's thousands of people doing it, and there's blueprints and there's things you can look to have success. GM is a tough job in the NFL, man, and there's only 32 of them, and there's got to be a little bit of a learning curve. So Kwesi Adofo-Mensah getting better. But, all right, I want to tell the Birds 365 viewers, there is many things that make John McMullen great. Here is one of those things, okay? So a tweet just came out at 8:10 a.m. That's 14 minutes ago from Jordan Schultz, from NFL Insider Jordan Schultz. It's about the tush push. No, I am not going to bore you on the tush push again, although some of the comments yesterday were dumb. He tweets out, my understanding of the tush push ban is that it's unlikely to have the votes to be banned, and there's a better chance discussions will be tabled for a future owners meeting. Those advocating for a ban have been working to sway opinions and get it banned. But as one source put it, and listen closely, where have we heard this before? The current language in the proposal is just not clear enough and can easily be manipulated. Johnny Mac has basically told us that verbatim on the show for the last month and change. So Johnny Mac, well done. But there's your update on the tush push, and that word "tabled" was brought up as well, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, and I was going to bring up there was one piece from Albert Breer that is worthwhile that I should talk about, because they're buried in there was, Albert gets to be up close and he heard some of the screaming going on in the meeting yesterday, and part of it was Howie, and that's going to get most of the and Howie didn't want to talk about it when the guys asked him, but the part that people should be focused on, I don't know if they are, is one of the guys arguing against it that he heard was Alan Sills. Now, who was Alan Sills? Well, that's the NFL's chief medical officer. So that tells me that the league has said, this is gone. It's just a matter of when. They can't get the votes now. And that's where it's tabled. It's eventually going to be gone. They're going to rework it. That's what I expected from the start. Just poorly worded, poorly constructed. I think it's got to be wider range. I think they have to ban pushing as a whole. We'll see how that works out. Not 100% on that. But when Alan Sills brought it up, because I noticed that everybody started talking about the safety measures, and there's no evident safety issues with this particular play. But Alan Sills evidently brought up, and this is the NFL. This is all the NFL is concerned about: future legal indemnity. If there is a potential issue, because some of the postures of the players on these, you saw it with Chris Jones trying to stop it. If an injury happens, it could be catastrophic, he said. And that's the last thing the league wants. And it's about projecting future. It's about protecting themselves from a legal standpoint. So once I heard that, this play's done. It's just a matter of when. They don't have the vote. I don't think they're going to have the votes right now.
Yeah, but yeah, I get it. The use of the term is going to make it different, but doesn't that fall into the same argument you made yesterday, John, in terms of it's football? There's catastrophic injury risk.
I'm with you 100%. I talk about the hypocrisy all the time. I'm with you 1,000%. I'm just telling the people what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, I got you.
It's got nothing to do with anything else. It doesn't even have that. I think a lot of people got up. You know what you saw when you have Sean McDermott? Everybody looks at it different. And I get why Eagles fans look at it. And I get more at media people, honestly, because they should know this shit. But they're not jealous of the Eagles. The Sean McDermott, they're the mouthpieces of the league. They're just echoing what the league is saying. That's what they're doing. And when Sills started talking about it, I said, oh boy, here we go. And once they're on board from that standpoint, the train is coming down the tracks. You might be able to get out of the way for a little bit, but it's coming. Might be late, might be 15 minutes late,
right?
Might be May, might be July. Got to word it, got to lobby, got to twist some arms, just like politics, but it's coming. And like I said, and the good part for Eagles fans, not going to matter to them. They're gonna be the best quarterback sneak team in the league because they have a quarterback who can do it and the best offensive line in the league. Or if not, because there's a little uncertainty at right guard, but they're certainly going to be top 5 offensive line. So they're going to be really good at it. And I've maintained now, because so many people are hyper-focused on trying to stop it or trying to figure out a way to stop it. If you spread them out right now, it would be even better. Just let Jalen Hurts pick the bubble. Put 5 receivers, put them under center, sneak it. They'll have a higher percentage than they had last year. which actually went backwards from the last season, 2021, where they didn't use it because so many people were hyper-focused. Some of it was Landon, couple penalties, trying to get the quick jump, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. A lot of it is just the semantics of the stupid stats that, God bless you, Jeff Kerr loves. I love Jeff, but like if your mentality is, all right, it's 3rd and 1.5, and your mentality is we're going to sneak it twice, we're going to tush push it twice to get this first down. To me, that's not a failure. People say they failed on 3rd and 1.5.
Right.
No, they didn't. It's part of the plan, and they ultimately get it on 4th down. But I digress. But yeah, once I think, and I don't want to talk about this anymore either, but when I saw Alan
update on it today.
Yeah, when I saw Alan Sills was talking at the meeting about future injuries, that's it, man.
Which is still, it still doesn't change that it's funny. So yeah, I mean this with all respect to Chris Jones, that dumbass thing he did in the Super Bowl where he laid freaking,
yeah, that
he laid like horizontal. Like, what the fuck was that going to do other than increase your chance at a catastrophic injury? Certainly didn't increase your chances at stopping the tush push. I mean, that was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And then he limped off the field. Maybe that was done for a reason.
That was, yeah, in hindsight, that was, no, I don't think he did it for a reason. In hindsight, that's a bigger deal from the league's perspective than the Frankie Luvu segment. I thought that was the big problem. But once that's the new information. And I appreciate you pointing out, I've been saying this for months, but that's the new information. Alan Sills talking about future injuries, acknowledging there hasn't been one, but in the future there could be a catastrophic one. And that's,
if your basically defensive tackle lines up horizontal across 3 offensive linemen and directly in the hole where the tush push is coming, your chances at catastrophic injury will increase. I mean, come on, Chris.
Well, I remember Cam Jurgens doing an interview. He's like, about that particular play. And he was like, really, dude? You're going to get taken for a ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a dumb thing to do, but I don't think he did it on purpose. Like, there will be that group of people that says he did it on purpose.
I'm not saying that.
That was just a dumb decision by a player, very good player, but ultimately, I think that's part of it. Yeah, and I'm not surprised if they do table it. I thought that was always going to be the end game here, and that just kicks it back to May or July. And they'll reword it. The competition committee will get behind it. It won't be the Packers anymore. It'll be the league.
And that's toast. If not this year, next year. If not next year, the year after. It is. Yeah, it is all but toast.
It is. It's coming. It's coming.
And for all the people asking in the chat, the simple question of, well, can't there be a catastrophic injury on every play? The answer is yes, everybody. The answer is 100% yes to that. How many times have we seen that in football? But that's not going to matter here. John, we'll get to some super chats here in this opening segment. I want to thank everybody for being here, all of our great listeners. Don't forget to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Drop your comments. All super chats go to the top. We'll always read all of our super chats, and then to our podcast listeners as well. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to leave a review on the podcast if you enjoy the show. So we appreciate everybody for all their contributions to helping Birds 365 grow. John, last thing I wanted to bring up, you used the phrase in this opening segment, swing and a miss. How about Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Browns, falling on the sword
for Jimmy,
Deshaun Watson? I thought that was a good, classy move.
Well, it was all that good for him. I mean, that was all Jimmy Haslam.
I know it was, but just because it was all Jimmy Haslam doesn't mean you'll get every who will go publicly and say, "Oh, put that one right on me."
Yeah. I just mean from the standpoint of good for him, and don't blame it on Kevin Stefanski or Andrew Berry or anybody else. I mean, Deshaun was as good as in Atlanta. I mean, it was a done deal. And Jimmy Haslam came in at the last minute and guaranteed the entire contract, pissed everybody off. And it didn't work. And I do think there's a bunch of revisionist history because look, from the standpoint of Deshaun Watson as a person, and I've never met him, and the allegations, yeah, I get people from that standpoint. But as a pure football player,
right?
I mean, I can't kill Jimmy Haslam for that. He was great.
I'm not going to lie to everybody. I wasn't on the air at this time. I was a Deshaun Watson truther. I thought he
was a great player.
He was a top 5 quarterback in the NFL when he brought the Houston Texans to the playoffs that one year. He was unbelievable. I watched him beat my Alabama Crimson Tide in the national championship. I was obviously back in college. He started his NFL career good. I'm with you on that. You can't knock, especially the Browns, right? Who have been in purgatory forever, but I think they should have saw it through with Baker. I mean, Baker led you to the playoffs. I mean, come on. But anyway, we're not going to legislate what the Browns did. Yeah. But I thought it was good that he. I thought it was good that he told the story.
If you look at his last year in Houston, which was not a good year, he really took off in 2018. But from a team perspective, it wasn't good. But he had a 70% completion percentage, 4,800 yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions on a bad football team. And that kind of tells you what, he had to sit out basically almost 2 years. And football is not a sport where you can just say, all right, I'm not going to play for 2 years and come back. In 1 year, Le'Veon Bell left as maybe the best running back in the NFL at the time. He took off a year, he had contract, he came back, never the same player.
He stunk.
Yeah.
He stunk.
It's
Didn't
not
Todd Gurley do the same with
well, he had a lot of injuries.
His was a little different.
Yeah.
That's right.
But I'm just talking in these cases, these were not injury related. There's not a lot of them because Deshaun and Le'Veon Bell's one I can think of. Even Hassan Reddick last year. Yeah, you look at what he did. And people are saying, well, why did Tampa Bay sign him? Well, I think their perspective is, if he can get back to what he was. But again, if you take, he essentially, he played at the end of the season, but he took a lot of time off. So I'd be concerned about that. It's just not a sport where you can go away and just pick up and be the same guy. And these are young men. Deshaun's not that old. But he had to sit. He's not even 30 yet, but he had to sit for almost 2 full years.
Right. And this was years ago. He was probably 27, 26.
Oh, yeah, at the time. Yeah. He's 29 now. And so he had to sit for the entire 2021 season and most of 2022.
Yeah. So he was 26 years old, 27 years old.
Yeah. From a football perspective, the Eagles fans don't want to play. The Eagles wanted him. Everybody wanted him. Everybody that needed a quarterback or were perceived to need a quarterback wanted him. Atlanta desperately wanted him. Everybody wanted him, despite all the issues, off the field issues. So that part of it is revisionist. But yeah, good for Jimmy Haslam. They're wrong. Sometimes you make a mistake and and there's nothing they can do about it because of the contract he handed out.
Yeah, right. They didn't expect him to stink on ice. I didn't expect him to stink on ice. I mean,
why would you?
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was phenomenal. And I think there's so much of that. It's like, you should have known he was going to be he went from being a top 5 quarterback to being the absolute shits. Give me examples of that. Now, again, you usually don't have to sit out a year and a half, more than a year and a half. Didn't work.
Here we go. Let's get to some super chats. By the way, we do have Ian Cummings coming up in hour number 2. So our draft guru from Pro Football Network, who does a great job, really great job. We've had him on before. We're going to have him on again as we dive into the NFL draft. In hour number 2, we'll take all super chats now. And anybody that has questions for Johnny Mac, you can drop them in the chat below. Mills checks in. What's up, Mills? He says, AJ on the move. It'll be done by draft time. Oh, boy.
What is this? A self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yeah, this
Is
is
this
no.
a New England
I think
fan?
Mills is already. I think he's a Cowboy fan. I think he's a Cowboy fan. Skid
Yeah.
Marks, what's up, Skid? He says, "Morning, fellas. Question, JMac. If you were going to read the tea leaves, if we draft a defensive tackle in the first, does that mean we will not re-sign Davis?" Good question, Skid.
No, I think if they draft a defensive tackle, it'll be more of, again, it's a different position, defensive. They'll be drafting more of a 3 technique like Walter Nolan to replace Milton Williams than a nose tackle to replace Jordan Davis. They're not taking a nose tackle in the first round. Now, people will say, well, they took Jordan Davis in the first round. Yes, they did. And that's part of the problem. That's why they're in the position. They'll probably learn from it. So if you are taking a 2-down player in the first round, you're going to have some of the Jordan Davis complications. Now, obviously, the Eagles at one point were hoping that he would be more than that. And they still, Howie talked about Jordan a little bit. And it looks pretty clear they're going to pick up the option, so which is not that big of a deal. Even if they declined it, they could still work out a longer-term deal. It's not the end of the world. He's going to be on the Eagles this year, but I do think they're going to pick up the option. It's a different position than what they could potentially be looking for in the first round. And the Eagles probably learned from what they went through with Jordan Davis, that's a position unless they're sure. And here's where they should learn. You're never going to have a nose tackle who's one of your 4 best pass rushers that you're going to want on the field on 3rd and long. It's never going to happen in this modern era of the NFL.
Maybe Dexter Lawrence, maybe.
Even that. I mean, even that, if you get, again, the Giants are terrible, so they're going to, it's going to work.
Yeah.
But if you want to be where you truly want to be, like the Eagles were last year, or the Eagles were in 2022, and you have the historic pass rush, there ain't going to be a nose tackle on the field.
Yeah, I got you. Although you put Dexter Lawrence on the Eagles, I think he'd be on the field when there's down. I'm not saying you're wrong from a football philosophy standpoint, but I'm saying Dexter Lawrence is that good.
Well, I agree. Dexter's great.
Yeah. He's not really. I should have used him because he's not. He's not.
And Chris Jones is in that gap, but Chris plays outside as well. So, and maybe there was some hope that Jordan Davis could turn into that type of player, but then I think it's just pure misevaluation.
Skid, thank you for the super chat, brother. I appreciate that. That was a good question there. Bird Gang checking in. Johnny Mac, dog. I think he's talking about the how I told everybody that you've been talking about it for months. Bird Gang, you always get the info here early from JMac. Worst behavior checking in. What's up, Worst? I have hope that Huff taught Howie to trust coaches' input more, and Vic had a say in some of these players that he could get production out of them. It's a fair hope. It's a fair hope to have. When I think he's talking about, or they're talking about, maybe some of the Timu signings. Maybe Vic had some input on them. Hey, I can get something out of this guy.
Howie always takes the input of coaches. I mean, he said it numerous times over the years. If you're drafting players that don't fit to what your coaches want to do, you're not going to be successful. He wants to be successful. So that's sort of baked into the process.
Right.
In the case of Huff, I think that's an instance where, that came after Vic saw him on the practice field, basically. Not necessarily before. And in the case of players they drafted this year, I mean, they're all 1-year guys, but yeah, I'm sure it's run by Vic. But yeah, Vic's is not going to be the deciding factor. That's one thing Howie has also learned. You got to make difficult decisions. So he's got to be the guy that, back in the Jalen Reagor, the coaching staff wanted Jalen Reagor. Now, you got to be very careful about that stuff because, once things go wrong, everybody's looking to point fingers. And you got coaches, you got scouts, and blah, blah, blah. But over the years, as things have gone, and receded to the background, it's pretty clear, yeah, the coaching staff wanted Jalen Reagor. And that was one of the impetuses, literal impetuses of Howie saying, all right, if my name's on this, I got to, good or bad, if my name's going to be on it, I'm going to make the decision.
Right.
And the personnel staff and the scouting department and Howie wanted Justin Jefferson. And the coaching staff wanted what they felt was more of a as funny as it sounds now, a vertical threat and a horizontal threat to stretch the field like Tyreek Hill. I can't even say it. Like Tyreek Hill. Now, Jefferson at the time, now everybody knows he can do everything. But remember, he was the 22nd pick in the draft. There's a bunch of teams who thought Justin Jefferson was just a slot receiver. So the Eagles were looking for a more vertical threat. And the coaching staff specifically wanted that trait on the offense. And Howie went against his better judgment and made a big mistake.
Some call that Howie propaganda, John. Is that true? Zeal
it is. Well, that's why I said the same thing. When things go bad, and I'm talking at the time I heard it at the first time, I had that same thought. Well, this is just pointing fingers, on a shitty pick. But no, over the years, it has become abundantly clear that is the true story.
Right. That Doug wanted Jalen Reagor. So
yes.
No, not a good pick there for Doug Peterson. Let's go to Bird Gang. Bird Gang checking in again. Thank you, Bird Gang. The Tush push is a safety issue, but we're about to have 18 games. Yeah, I'm with you, Bird Gang.
Well, Bird Gang, how many times have you heard me on the show say, yeah, it's all hypocrisy. I'm not arguing that. It's a waste of time to argue with hypocrites. How many times have I said this? Hypocrites don't care that they're hypocrites. Everything about football is dangerous. If anybody, including everybody in the chat, everybody in the NFL, everybody on the player's side, the NFLPA, if anybody talks about safety, the only position they can stand on is this is a very dangerous game and it is not good for you. So either don't play it or make that decision as a conscious adult that you understand the risk and play it. If we get to that point as a society, which we will never get to because there are too many hypocrites in the world, then you can have an honest discussion. Until you get to that point, yeah, everybody's a hypocrite. Anybody who brings up any safety issue, including positive for the players or negative for the players, is an absolute hypocrite.
But isn't this the perfect example of, John, why if we're not at that point in terms of being able to differentiate like adults, like you just said, if we're not at that point, which I agree with you, we're never going to get to that point. Isn't this just going to create an extremely watered down version of this game? Because on one hand, you have the football people. On the other hand, you have the safety people.
Well, yeah, that's what we have. Watered down, yes.
Instead of accepting their fates, they're battling and they're making football worse, and it's still a safety hazard. Like I think they're just watering it down, and it's not as good of a product, and they're really not even achieving either end goal.
You can take out, I think, in your sentence, they have watered down the game. There's no argument. It's not even the same game. That's one. We all have these discussions. They're big sports radio discussions. Mount Rushmore's, who's the best player? A lot of games have changed. Baseball has changed dramatically, but it's still baseball at its core. You just got a bunch of nerds, looking up and saying you got to play the game this way, but it's still the same game. Changing pitching, philosophies, and you can't throw this many pitches. That's all sports science stuff, but it's still the same game at its core. Same thing with basketball. We'll take 3-point shots instead of this, but it's still the same game at its core. Football is completely different. Mm-hmm. Completely different. not only the way they play it from that standpoint, the evolution of analytics and all that stuff, but on the field. Like, how do you compare? People look at Lynn Swann and John Stallworth's numbers, Hall of Fame receivers, and say, how are they Hall of Fame receivers? You got some jack off catching 80 balls in this era, and they catch 50, going over the middle, getting attacked.
Right.
They're
not even teaching the same game today, John. These players aren't even learning the game like they learned.
No. And it's a completely different game. Same thing with playing quarterback. You asked me last week, I think, I'd lean towards who's the greatest quarterback of all time. I still lean towards Joe Montana for the reason I just think it was so much more difficult to play the position at that time. And then you can even say the same thing going back to, because he had it easier than Terry Bradshaw, who won 4 Super Bowls.
Right.
And didn't lose one. So, it's a completely different game. But if people look at Terry Bradshaw's statistics, they go, well, this guy's not that good. Because everything's under the framework of what the game is now, which has made it. Guess what? As simple as when you left the pocket, you couldn't just throw the football away.
Right.
You had to figure something out. And guys would get absolutely destroyed from a physical standpoint. Yeah. And which is, I'm not saying that's good, but.
Well, no.
The NFL made a lot of money.
I agree. Go stand on it, John.
Well, the NFL
acknowledge as adults that we're playing a violent game.
I've said that from day one. I said, if you really want to be honest about safety, you should be advocating for football to be completely banned.
Exactly. If you're going to take that stance and not be a hypocrite, then that's what you'd be advocating for, because every play has that type of.
And I always bring up, author Herb Mushnick, because I've had this. He's the only one I've ever had an honest discussion with, because he stands on that and he says it should be banned. And I'm like, cool, I'll have that discussion. At least you're not being a hypocrite.
Right. At least you're being honest.
The other stuff is you can legislate this out. You can do bullshit. You can't. You think you can. It makes you feel better as an individual, maybe. Not the NFL. They know. But for fans who say it, oh, you got to worry about the safety again. No offense, you're a hypocrite. You don't give a shit. Like I said, you don't care about torn ACLs, about spine injuries. Oh, you got to get concussions out of the game. Here's how you get concussions out of the game. Don't play football.
So true. So true. And speaking of spine injuries, let's give one last update here. Jordan Schultz followed up on his tweet. And as we were talking about it, he tweeted this out. Another thing Johnny Mac has said, talks on the Tush push will continue today. If it's voted on today and receives enough votes to be banned, one source said the main reason will be the potential for injury, particularly to the spine. The thinking is to prevent a serious injury before it happens rather than waiting for a disaster. As of this morning, it did not sound like there are enough votes. I'm sensing a table, John, as you mentioned yesterday, what might be true.
Yeah. And the only reason it's getting tabled, or it's going to get tabled, I think Jordan's right. Well, I've been saying it for a long time, but and thank you, Jordan, for but anyway, because it's terribly legislated. It was put together so poorly. That's the reason. And to me, it's obvious where this is going now. They're going to table it and they're going to pick it up in May, where like everybody's down there now. I wish I was down there, but I got to do a show. Everybody in the NFL, and by that I mean media reporters, are down there for the annual league meeting. It's a big deal in league circles. The May meeting, the July meeting, much lesser. You'll see the big wig national, that's it.
Right. Some people will be there. It won't be as big of a thing.
So it'll be easier to do it from a public relations standpoint. There won't be as much media there. So that helps. Yeah, I'd be stunned if it's not tabled today. And if they let it get to a vote, because if they let it get to a vote, it's going to get voted down. And I think they're smart enough to table it and take it up.
Watered down is an understatement. This is like kiddie pool water. It's like that kiddie pool water after the kids have been in it all day on the beach. I mean, this is some watered down product they're going to create if all these safety measures go through here. But it looks like that's the way it's going to be. Eventually, over time, as Johnny Mac mentioned on the show a little bit ago, we could be 10 years away from two-hand touch.
That was
legit.
And I laughed. I laughed at people. Now I do not laugh at them.
Yeah.
I do not laugh at them. We are going down that route. And yeah, I do not think it will be fun. I do think, everyone says there's no way that the NFL at its current level of popularity will ever, be challenged. Man, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. Boxing was immense in this country. And the safety people got a hold of it. A lot of other issues, and it's barbaric. I'm not disputing that. But look at where boxing is today. Baseball, it's not barbaric. Was for many, many years the great American pastime, by far the most popular sport in America. It's number 3 at best now. It's because you're number 1 doesn't mean you're number 1 in perpetuity, especially if you can do dumb shit after dumb shit after dumb shit like baseball did. And baseball, it was strike after strike after strike. And at some point, they turned enough people off to where it went in a different direction. Football.
I wonder what the end goal, man, or what the end game is here. Like, I think right now we all sit here and football's been around since all of us were alive, and will probably be alive or around after we're all gone from this world. But got to think these leagues aren't bulletproof, as Slager says in the chat. I wonder what the end game is of these things.
Oh, they're not bulletproof. I mean,
No,
you look at it from a standpoint of, I was talking about TV rights fees. You look, I mean, if TV pulls out tomorrow, and it might be for a different reason because streaming takes over. Now, the NFL they've shown with Netflix and Amazon that, as long as the name on the check changes, but the check still arrives, it doesn't matter. Right. It doesn't matter if it's coming from Netflix or Fox, but that money's got to keep coming in. If it doesn't, and these companies wake up and say, you know what? Because they lose money on the NFL, for people that don't know.
Right.
I mean, that's because they paid them so much. If that happens, overnight, it's a different landscape. Overnight.
It's hard to project that to happen, though. Have you seen what this country is entertained by, Johnny? I mean, it doesn't take two-hand touch. Might get 150 million watchers in the Super Bowl still.
I don't think it will. That's my point.
Maybe. We'll see what ends up happening with it. Good point here from my boy. Where is he? Real Zeal says safety. This is a perfect example. He said safety killed boxing, not MMA, a more violent sport. Zeal, they don't listen to the nerds in MMA. If they listen to the nerds in MMA, there would be no MMA.
That's true. John McCain tried to ban MMA.
Dana White does not listen to the nerd. This is a perfect difference.
Dana White is, boy, I mean, you can say a lot of things bad about Dana White. One, hit his wife in public. That's number 1. Number 2, and I've talked to Dana. I've had him on my radio shows and things like that. He does not give a fuck about, everybody out. Like the NFL is so concerned about public perception.
Way too much.
Dana White does not care.
And
you have these,
serves his league best.
Some of these journalists ask him questions about some fighter saying something stupid, and he says the same thing, but they still go down. He says the same thing every time. They're allowed to say whatever the fuck they want. This is America. And it has nothing to do with me. If everybody could get to the point of being Dana White, you'd be in at least I'll say this: you'd be in at least a more honest space.
We'd be tush pushing for the next century, baby.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Well, I don't know if you saw that, which is stupid. No, that he's got this sort of slap fighting thing. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's insane.
When he did that, I'm like, dude, what are you doing? A, it's not going to be popular, and it's not popular. And B, it's just, yeah, you're trolling. You're trolling people at that point. But he doesn't care. So I respect that.
Yep, and look, it's good way to do business when you live in this type of world, as we just talked about, with hypocrites and doctors and football people. I mean, look at what you get when you take every mumbo jumbo opinion and put it into a pot. You got warm water. You got warm water down football. That's what we're getting.
Yeah. Well, and then because the tush push has overtaken everything, there's far more important things on the docket from the aspect of football. The overtime rule, which the Eagles are trying to make more uniform.
So stupid.
It is so stupid. And why is it stupid? Because they watered it down, and then it created another problem. Instead of just saying, shut up, you little whiny asses. I don't give a shit if Josh Allen didn't touch the football. Don't listen to him. Keep the same rule. Is it perfect? No. But then you don't create this down the road. Now you got to do this. Well, now this creates another problem. The unintended consequences. Stop listening to people who are not even experts in the field. Who cares what they think? They'll get over it. But they care.
They do. They do. 100%. Johnny Mac, good stuff. Let's get to our first commercial break. I want to thank everybody for being here. We have Ian Cummings coming up about 20 minutes, so we'll dive into the NFL draft. Got to keep you guys posted. John, when are they any idea on when we'll have a little bit of clarity on this tush push thing down at the meetings? Are they supposed to meet at like noon, 12, 2?
I don't know the timing. It's supposed to be today, this afternoon. So I don't know the exact timing, but okay. You'll hear it pretty quickly. Like I said, I'm pretty sure they're not going to let it go to a vote.
Right.
Can't say 100%, but I think tabling is. There's no way you can pass this specific, even if you believe in and you want the tush push banned and just the tush push banned. It's so poorly worded. You can't pass this rule. So from that standpoint, you have to rework it and bring it back. So just from that limited aspect of it, you can't pass this rule as it's worded. It's a waste of time. I mean, literally you could pass it, but you're not doing anything with it because it's so poorly constructed. So just from that standpoint, they have to scale it back and rework it.
I do get a kick out of the 18-game things as we talk about safety and all these other issues. It's like they're going to water the game down so much that they feel good about having 18 games.
Well, I see both sides of that. I mean, I get a kick out of, the NFLPA saying, oh, we can't play 18 games. Why can he play 17 games? What the fuck is the difference?
I'd rather play 16 and let him hit and let him play football.
But the point is 16, 17, 18, where's the demarcation line? The demarcation line is 0 or whatever you agree to. And that comes down to money. If they share enough money for the players, they'll play 19. They'll play 20. I don't advocate it, but that's all that is money.
Right.
And, I think the NFL also has to be cognizant over the limit of their product. There's only, back in the day, there was only 16 of these things, and now there's 17. You go way back, there was 12, then it moved to 14, then it moved to 16, 17, now it's going to be 18. And the argument with that, they use safety, they weaponize safety, the NFLPA in that subject. But they're weaponizing it to get more money.
Right.
It's not really about safety. So, but people
Everybody
applaud him.
weaponizes whatever they can to get to win their side for their point. That's
Exactly.
what people, that's what people do. No doubt about it. Good stuff there. Blaine says, how many votes does it take? I think it's 24, right? Out of 32.
24,
Yeah, 24 votes. So Blaine, it needs 24 votes out of 32 for the owner. So a pretty good amount. That's 75%, obviously. So pretty good amount there. Let's get to our commercial break. Appreciate all you guys listening in. We'll be right back on Birds 365.